This is Module 7, Lesson 4. We're talking about marketing budget, where to invest, and expected ROI. So let's go a little bit on the budget basics here. How much of your revenue should you spend on marketing each month?
Well, I guess it depends on if you want to grow. But if you want to grow 10% and above, definitely not less than 10%.
So why should new practices actually spend more than older ones?
Because it's a little bit more difficult to get the ball rolling, right? So you have to put a little bit more energy to get the ball rolling.
Momentum.
Once you get that momentum going, then it's a little bit easier.
So where should they spend? What is like some places you should put most of your marketing money?
Yeah, I like to put a lot of marketing budget or marketing dollars into digital ads, right? I think digital ads, because they're always running, whether I'm there paying attention to them or not, they're running. I also like to do nice referral gifts. So that's where I like to put most of my marketing dollars.
Why is it smart to spend some money on getting a website going?
Yeah, you've got to get the website going on. That's the first thing that people are going to look for, right? Even if they see your name on a billboard, they're going to Google you first before they come in. I bet you I don't have one patient that has ever come into my office that hasn't Googled me. And
one thing that I, with your marketing is understanding cost per lead. And this might be something, it's a little in the weeds for people, but, depending on your location will depend on your cost per lead. Like New York is going to pay way more than Pensacola is paying.
Yeah, I think a good just earmark is probably less than $100 per lead. And yes, you're right. If we're going to New York, it may be a little different than Wichita. But the idea is that you want to get that number as close to zero as you possibly can. Mm-hmm. I went to a conference one time and we had to do this worksheet of cost per acquisition. And there were a couple people whose were zero, which was wild to me.
Wow.
Basically, that means that they're not spending any money marketing.
Yeah.
But the common denominator were all of those people were legacies that their parents had the practice for 30 years before them. So they built this rapport in the community, and that's why that happens.
Yeah.
But the average person, that does not happen.
Well, and if you think about it, cost per lead, let's say you're spending $100 on getting, a patient to start. That is on a little bit higher and everything, but think about how much you're actually making. If you could go to the S&P right now and put in $100 and get $6,000 out of that.
That's absolutely right. And because at that same conference, there were plastic surgeons there, and theirs was really high. Like their cost for acquisition was like almost $1,000, but some of their services were $20,000 and $30,000. Mm-hmm. So it makes sense. And to your point, I mean, it's a no-brainer. It just sometimes it just sounds like it's a lot more than it is.
You brought up cost per acquisition, and we've been talking about cost per lead. Let's dive in a little bit on like the differences on that.
Yeah, the cost per lead is the cost just to get a lead, right? I mean, it makes so much sense, but it should be much lower than the cost per acquisition, because you should have a ton of leads coming in, and then not all of them are going to end up being starts. Not all of them are going to be like showing up to the practice, but it still should be at a proportion that is acceptable to you, whatever that may be.
Okay, and then cost per acquisition is what?
Yeah, cost per acquisition is when the amount that it costs to actually start a patient. That number is typically higher. You find that to be around $100 all the way up to $1,000. So there's a big range there, depending on your demographic, depending on how specific you are. All of those factors kind of play into it, but it should be a lot more than your cost per lead.
Understanding that, I think, will help people know it's like, okay, my cost per lead is from 15 to maybe up to 100 or something around that, but my cost per acquisition can range from 100 to like 1,000.
Correct.
So how can you know if your marketing is actually helping you grow?
Yeah, you've got to track it, right? And you've got to track it in a couple of different ways. You got to track it to the number of patients that are in your door, but then also the quality of patients needs to be right too. And I think this is a time that you partner with a good marketing team. Like, I use you guys, and I have monthly calls. We have monthly calls, and I say, hey, I feel like this. Let's see if the numbers are this. And we talk through the numbers, and I think that's really important to always stay on top of it, because the things that you care about, you got to track. And And that's exactly what we do.
So let's talk a little bit about common mistakes. Why is it risky on spending a lot of money on, kind of like legacy ad kind of stuff, like billboards, mailers? Like how is that sometimes can be a risk?
Yeah, the risk is it's hard to track, right? And I do think there's probably value in it, but if you've got a small budget or you've got a budget that needs to be hyper focused, you've got to be able to track those things. And so digital marketing and that type of thing is so much easier to see the ROI. It has a direct correlation, and you can see numbers, and it makes sense. Whereas some of the legacy stuff, you don't have that ability to do.
So how much do you need to spend as a startup on marketing?
Yeah, so I think that you need to probably spend around 10%. And really what happens is your 10% at a startup rate is less dollars than a mature practice, right? So as your practice starts to mature, the dollar amount goes up, but the percentage might get a little smaller. But when you first start up, you don't have a huge budget. So we're going to stay around the 10%, maybe a little bit more to get the ball rolling, get us some momentum going.
Well, there you have it, everybody. That is Module 7. We'll see you in the next one.